Based in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, just on the west coast, the Washington State-Canada border. They serve from Montreal to Vancouver, which is a pretty good sized territory. They also serve parts of North America, including Minnesota, home of the Twin Cities, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Washington State. Once again, here I see a CP locomotive on lease to Norfolk Southern, taken a few years ago. Now we've talked about our big companies. Let's talk about a smaller company called a short line. A short line railroad is an independent railroad company that operates over a relatively short distance. And the short lines are classified as a Class 3 railroad, which is a very, very small operation. And here's the four that we have in the area. We're going to briefly talk about the four of them. The first one we're going to talk about is the Norfolk Forces Belt Line, reporting marks NPBL, based right over in South Norfolk, about 15 minutes from this campus. They interchange with both CSX and NS here. They distribute mixed freight to local businesses. Their primary service is delivering loads of grain locally. They own 2 locomotives, as you see up here, and here I provide the information. They pay a yearly lease to Norfolk Southern to operate, and Norfolk Southern also does their repair work for their locomotives. The next one, right up about 10 minutes from my house, is the Commonwealth Railway, owned by the Genesee and Wyoming Company, based in Darien, Connecticut. They are a short line railroad that serves Suffolk and Franklin, Virginia, and they partnered with, once again, both CSX and NS. The Commonwealth leases track to CSX and NS, like one of the previous pictures, for short runs to PMT. In Suffolk, they bring the inbound containers to Portsmouth, and they serve the local chemical plant about 10 minutes from my house. The Franklin Division, they serve the international paper mill known as Union Camp. They move the inbound cars around the plant, and they prepare the empties to go back on CSX. And here are just a couple of engines that they have in the Suffolk Division, which both are built for the Santa Fe. And the Franklin jobs have 3 locomotives. And this is the Commonwealth Railway / Rail Link operations. I went to see them a couple of summers ago with a friend of mine, and these are old-time locomotives that are still being used today. A fairly new short line we're going to be talking about is the Buckingham Branch Railroad. They're based in Dillon, Virginia, just on the other side of Charlottesville. They travel on 275 miles of track. It's a fairly large short line, mostly within the central part of our state. The Buckingham Branch was founded in 1989, just a little over 30 years ago, by Robert Bryant. They began with the acquisition of a 16-mile long branch from CSX's James River subdivision, which is in the Richmond metro area. The company started with 1 locomotive and 1 caboose, and they have quickly expanded over the past 30 years by coal and grain transportation, by interchanging with CSX, and they partnered down here with Norfolk Southern with interchanging with mixed freight along the old Eastern Shore Railroad. As some of you might not know, but your professor and I know that the Pecos Railroad, formerly the Eastern Shore Railroad, ceased its operations in May of 2018. The Buckingham Branch has taken over only some of their old operations. And here is just a little quick synopsis of what their operations are. This one here, 6.7 at Diamond Springs, just right up the street, it goes past the new outlet mall. I've only seen the operation one time, and they're quickly getting that line back up and running again. A short line that is not too awfully talked about, the Chesapeake and Albemarle Railroad, also owned by the Genesee and Wyoming Company, just like the Commonwealth, based in Edenton, North Carolina. The CNA is a short line railroad that operates on 68 miles of track from Chesapeake, Virginia, about 20 minutes from here, all the way to Edenton, North Carolina. I've been fortunate to catch them twice. And they interchange with everybody, Norfolk Southern, CSX, and the Norfolk Forces Belt Line. They move grain and they also move rock. And here are just the 3 engines that I have seen. I have a few fun facts for these locomotives. This one right here, the 502, was built for the Florida East Coast Railway. And Chesapeake and Albemarle got that a few years ago. Now the 2nd and 3rd engines were originally built as passenger locomotives for the Santa Fe. And they rebuilt them in the 1970s for freight service. This one here being one of my favorites. The 2158 is in the Chesapeake and Albemarle paint scheme, which is the last of its kind. And the middle one is painted in the current Genesee and Wyoming colors. Now, moving aside from freight, let's move to passenger railroads. Let's go. The first passenger system that we're going to talk about is a commuter railroad. Well, a commuter railroad transports commuters between a city center or to a middle outer suburb area within 10 miles. And we're going to be looking at a couple of really interesting examples. I'll give you guys a second to write that down. The first we're going to talk about is a relatively new commuter line. Raise your hand if you're from the northern part of Virginia. Okay, so I've got a couple here. You two have probably seen this company, the Virginia Railway Express Agency. They're based in Alexandria, just on the Virginia side of our nation's capital. Founded in 1992 by the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission and the Potomac and Rappahannock Transportation Commission. And here is just a few of the areas that they serve. And this right here is Alexandria Station. The metro station, that's King Street here on the right side, and this is the Amtrak station in Alexandria. And this photo here goes to its respective owner. The next one, I'm sure all of you have heard of before, the Washington, D.C. Metro. How many of you have ridden this awesome system? Wow, fewer people than I thought. I'm really shocked at that. I'm sure a lot of y'all have ridden this system before, and I have too. They are known as the Washington Metropolitan Transit Authority, based in our nation's capital. It was formed by Congress as an interstate compact between the District of Columbia, the state of Maryland, and the Commonwealth of Virginia on February 20th, 1967, just over 50 years ago. They serve Northern Virginia, parts of Maryland, and the D.C. metropolitan area. Here I catch a couple of series of cars, and there's one of them that I'm going to point out in particular, is this one here. This is their newest, their 7000 series cars. Excuse me. These were put into service in 2015 and were manufactured by Kawasaki. As most everybody knows, they manufacture motorcycles. I was fortunate to ride in these at the end of 2018, and these cars are actually super nice. So if you've not ridden the DC Metro system, please go over there and ride it. It's a really cool system. Now, I understand y'all are going to be riding this type of system this coming week, a light rail system. A light rail system is a system that transports light loads very fast, and its primary service is moving commuters. One example that you guys will be riding this week, according to your professor, is Norfolk's light rail service called the Tide. Operates in the Norfolk metro area. The Hampton Roads Transit started the operations in 2011, and they serve the Norfolk area all the way to Newtown Road. And here is just what one of the cars looks like that y'all will be riding this week. I've been fortunate to ride this line 2 or 3 different times through this class and another class, and it's a very neat little system to ride. Now let's step away from our railroads and talk about our major ports. We have 4 major ports here in the area. The Norfolk International Terminal, Portsmouth Marine Terminal, the Virginia International Gateway, the Port of Richmond, and the Virginia Inland Port. After doing some research a couple of years ago, about fall of 2018, the Port of Virginia ranks number 7 in the U.S. This is excellent. The first port on the list, Norfolk International Terminal, my favorite terminal. I understand you all went there recently. Located in Norfolk, Virginia, right off Interstate 64. They work on 648 acres of operating land. Here we see lots of big cranes lifting the containers off trailer chassis and loading the outbound ships, as y'all saw recently. These machines right here are called a straddle loader, which they move up and down the aisles of containers. MyJet Cranes is a crane that's specifically designed to move containers. When I took the class 3 years ago, we went to the International Terminal, and I always told the professor, I don't want to go home. I love this area so much because you're seeing ships, trucks, and trains all working together in this spot. It's a really cool show to watch. The port has direct access for Norfolk Southern, and CSX has some access to the Norfolk Portsmouth Beltline. The next one, right across the Elizabeth River, as you probably got to see, is Portsmouth Marine Terminal. Located in Portsmouth, Virginia, right off of Interstate 664. They're the second largest of the four ports, operating on 219 acres of land. Now, both railroads have access to this port. Norfolk Southern has it through the Commonwealth by interchange. The CSX has direct access and access to the Commonwealth Railway. So CSX has a little bit of advantage over Norfolk Southern in this case. Another part of Portsmouth Marine Terminal is the Virginia International Gateway. Here is just an aerial shot of what it looks like. The Port of Richmond is the next one, located in our state capital, right off Interstate 95. They are the 26th largest port in the U.S. It is known as the gateway to Central Virginia. The 20-foot equivalent capacity of this port is about 50,000 to 60,000 TEUs, which is pretty good. Norfolk Southern performs switching at this port, and CSX has a majority of the access for this port. CSX is heavily present in the Richmond area thanks to two yards that are there. One of them is ACO, just right off the interstate. And Norfolk Southern has a branch line that they serve some local businesses there. The final port is the Virginia Inland Port, known as the VIP. I call it the VIP port. They work on 161 acres of operating land located in Front Royal, Virginia. As you notice, there's no water on this port. That's why it is called the Inland Port. It's trucks and trains specifically here. Norfolk Southern serves this terminal 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. And there's one bullet I want to mention. They held over 60,000 TEUs in 2008. What does this bullet tell you? The bullet tells you that the intermodal business right now is going up significantly. More stuff is being transported by rail, and when we went 3 years ago to NIT, they were getting ready to expand the lease to expand these terminals. So it's a really good project for Port of Virginia, and it's also good for our railroads because the railroads are benefiting from this. Now, for the ones of you who have known me for a long time, you guys know I watch a lot of trains and watch stuff on my YouTube channel. I do have a few trains that we're going to be looking at, and one of them is the UPS train that has a unique power setup. And I'd like to show you that now. I took this video in Petersburg, and you're going to notice something different with this train. Let's sit back and take a listen. My favorite train on CSX. I go all the way to Petersburg to go get it. Made some noise to Petersburg, baby. As you can see, here's the container cars we talked about and the 53-foot container. This is a single stack. They can't double stack this train because of some of the tunnels are so old. They can't widen or expand it. It costs a lot of money and they're extremely old. And this train was going about a good 50 miles an hour from Petersburg. And this train, in fact, was 167 cars long. This is a massive train. As you can see here, there are the spine cars we talked about that are transporting the containers. You're probably wondering why one engine was up front and not two. I'll fast forward so you guys can definitely take a look at this. Coming on through there, the UPS trailers right there. They're a 53-foot container. That's your Amazon packages, the clothes you wear, the cell phones you're using. You can just think that some of your everyday items are on this train. Really interesting to watch. Is called distributed power. You're probably wondering, why distributed power on the trains? Well, you see you had one engine up front that's pulling about half the train. The second engine's purpose is to push the first half and pull the second half. This concept is used for long trains like this one, and there are even some times where you may see engines on the back of the train where they're pushing a train up the mountains, especially up steep grades like out west in California is a really good place where you can get it. Altoona, Pennsylvania is another operation you can see with engines on the back. Now we're going to be looking at a few of the trains I've seen in my own home city of Suffolk. We're going to be seeing a hopper train, and we're going to also be looking at listening to some track authority that was issued to a local train. And the scanner that you're hearing is actually mine because I get to listen to the railroad talk all the time. It's like music.
You get a little excited about the trains.
Actually, on this one I did not.
Oh, really?
Well, I keep it inside. They had another train that was tying up on the other track, so what this train had to do was cross over it on the closer track and then pass me. It's pretty neat. One engine on this train pulled 105 hoppers out of the pier and doing every bit of track speed. One engine. I love my cruise on that, I'll tell you that much. And there your hoppers are going back out west to get more color. As you see, some of these cars have 4 drop doors and 3 drop doors. 4-bay and 3-bay cars. That's where sometimes the coal is dumped. But at the pier, they roll them up the ramp, use a rotary coal dumper, turn the car upside down, and they shoot it right back down and put it on an outbound train. Cool operation to see. That's who went back down to West Virginia to get more coal. And I was pretty happy when I got off work. I'll give you another cool example. I actually had the crews of one of these trains. I've actually gotten to know these guys over the past couple of years. And they had to pick up somebody, and the rest of it will be explained. His name is Rockstar because his hair is always in a mullet. And he's been with the company 20 years. So the last one we're going to be looking at is the track authority that you're going to be listening to on the radio. So this is what I mentioned earlier. And the dispatcher for our territory is in the back. Confirm one more time. As you just heard in that transmission by the train crew, they called the local dispatcher to work a local plant. And this is required for all movements. And once that track authority is done, once they are finished, they'll tell the dispatcher saying, we have finished here, everything's locked, lined, and restored, and they'll say, All right, you guys are good to go, and then they'll move on to the next job. Now, aside from watching trains and watching engineer Pat take videos and pictures, another concern is the environment. Over the last several years, the government has been pushing for a cleaner environment with the newest emissions rating called Tier 4. All equipment that you normally would see is being built to Tier 4 regulations or Tier 4 final, which is basically it's the newest emissions level that is required by the EPA that reduces pollution at a very, very low level. The locomotive industry has responded to that. This is General Electric's newest locomotive. It's their Tier 4 locomotive, and every railroad has actually purchased these. And I've seen Norfolk Southern and all the other railroads I have mentioned with the Tier 4 locomotive representing from one of those railroads. Now, let's step aside from America and let's go around the globe. Just a few fun facts. I'd like just to point out just a couple of these. In 2014, the U.S. earned about $82 billion in revenue. 2014 was a good year for the railroad. On over in Japan, they only move about 5% of its freight by rail, but that is quickly changing. France and Germany have had infrastructure deficiencies, which limit the length of train that they use, and some of that freight has actually been declining in some years. So sometimes the deficiencies are really hard on the railroads. Well, the fact from CSX, an average freight train averages around 7,800 feet, which is a pretty good sized train. Both France and Germany are working with government officials to improve the infrastructure and allow the trains to be longer. But now in Norway, they're recently enjoying excellent growth. Their measures right now are expanding their terminals like NIT in the Port of Virginia, and also creating new passing routes for trains and making their lines a lot safer. Now let's just look at a few of the miles of track in a couple of these countries. Just a few I'm going to point out. The United States has about 141,000 miles of track. China being the second largest at 75,000 miles, and Germany being the third top one is the 25,672 mark. Norway being the smallest at just over 2,500 miles. Now, a lot of high-speed trains are coming into the rail industry. Have they changed the way we travel? Is it faster or is it safer? Well, the answer is yes to all of those questions. Over the last 40 years, with the improvements of technology, high-speed trains have become popular around the world, especially in Europe and Asia. And the US has a little bit as well. High-speed trains are efficient, they're electric-powered, they travel fast speeds to move cargo and passengers extremely fast. We're going to be looking at some examples of these futuristic trains. Let's talk about America's version first. It's primarily focused on Amtrak. Amtrak improved their dedicated high-speed line from the late 70s to the late 90s, about a 20-year project. Amtrak improved the Northeast corridor. If you're from the northern area, raise your hand if you're from the northern area, like New York and New Jersey. Okay, you've probably seen some of the high-speed trains out there. It's a huge corridor there. This is what Amtrak is home for. This is their dedicated high-speed rail that runs from our nation's capital to Boston, Massachusetts. So a relatively large territory. They purchased their Acela Express in 2000, so it just turned 20 years old. And that means acceleration and excellence. They move passengers up to 160 miles an hour. And here is some things they tested with. They obviously purchased the Acela, as you see here. But these are the two that they tested. They're not highly talked about. The Swedish X2000 is on the left, and the German ICE train is in the middle. The ICE train was designed by Siemens, and Germany actually bought this train, and this is an ICE 1 set. And they've been rebuilt by Deutsche Bahn, and they're still in service today. But these two trains failed because the cars didn't turn with the train. The Acela was different because when the train goes into a curve, the cars tilt left or right as much as about 4 degrees, depending on the speed and the sharpness of the curve. This is why the Acela set itself apart from these two here. And that's why Amtrak said, we're going to go with the Acela. Now we're going to move on over to Asia, Japan specifically. Japan Railways Group is known as JR. They're home to Japan's railway. It was 7 companies altogether that took over the assets of Japan National Railways in 1987. They are known for the famous Shinkansen bullet train. These bullet trains race from one end of Japan to the other, with moving passengers up to 186 miles an hour, so slightly faster than the Acela. But how was the bullet train developed? Was it a genius man? Or was it somebody from the railroad agency? Well, if it wasn't for a strong 70-year-old man in Japan named Shinji Sogo, without him, the first bullet train might not have been developed. Excuse me. A little bit of background on Mr. Sogo. He was actually a very intelligent man. It's somebody that's not talked about too often. Sogo was born in 1884, just right outside of Tokyo. He graduated from college in 1909 from the Faculty of Law at Tokyo Imperial University. And that same year, he joined the railroad. He started out as a minor office clerk, but he is known today as the father of the bullet train. But while in Japan, the railroads were going through a serious crisis during and after World War II. The railroads were in terrible condition. They were using worn-out equipment, and they were dangerously overcrowded. But problems were still happening. In 1955, with problems still happening at an alarming rate, Sogo was asked to take over as head of Japan National Railways. But this question shocked the nation. He was 70 years old, but can he fix it? Well, after becoming head of the railroad, Sogo had a vision between Osaka and Tokyo. He wanted to build a high-speed line extending those two cities, which is 320 miles. But also part of his plan was to design the new train with current technology that was used in Japan. While he was getting started, his engineers went to work on designing this new train. They used technology that was in the country at the time by distributing the traction motors throughout the train to provide equal weight. After it was completely designed, the Shinkansen was put in service in October of 1964, and it was a major success, not only for Japan and Asia, but it has also been a global success. I'll explain why in a minute. Here is the Shinkansen that Mr. Sogo designed. It does look like a bullet, and some of these sets, in fact, are still being used today. I did some research on that one. And the one on the right is Japan's newest. It's the Nozomi Series 700, which is about the same speed as the Shinkansen. But as light and sleek as these are, there's something even faster. It is called the TGV, or Train à Grande Vitesse, which is French for high-speed rail. The idea of modernizing the French railways occurred in 1960 to replace older equipment and to transport passengers safely and more efficiently. The first TGV that was designed was the TGV 001, which launched in 1971 by the French National Railways, or SNCF. In 1972, it was powered by a gas turbine, which topped speeds of 198 miles an hour, which was very, very fast for the early 70s. The gas turbine-powered TGVs ran until the energy crisis in 1973, which suddenly made these TGVs very costly. And your professor probably remembers the fuel shortage in the early 70s. Well, that was during the Carter administration. Oh, really?
He said no.
You're killing a truck and mule. In the same year, the TGV became electrified, meaning it was powered by overhead wires. Since that electrification in 1973, not only was it more efficient, the TGV itself, the Atlantique model in particular, broke records of 320 miles an hour. They have over 17 billion riders per year. They have not had a single fatality. An excellent safety rating. Give you a second to write some of this stuff down. Excuse me. Now, where does the TGV serve? There's the Atlantique model that broke that 320 mile an hour speed record. Here is a system map of where the TGV serves. And I list a few of the major cities above. I just want to point out a couple of them. Paris, of course, La Rochelle is a major stop on the SNCF, and of course, Lyon. In 1976, during the same time Amtrak was improving their high-speed line, France began to build this high-speed line extending from Paris to Lyon, and it opened in 1981. And this is highly used today. And it will cruise on this line at about 186 miles an hour, which is still pretty fast for the TGV. Now, let's focus on longer distance freight trains. We've talked about long distances by passenger and freight, but, excuse me, some of the railroads around the world are transporting freight long distances. The impact of transporting freight longer distances is definitely cheaper than transporting it by air. Although the costs are lower for the railroads, profit opportunities exist. But now, what about transporting freight from one country to the next country? I have a global example. The China to London freight train. This was launched 3 years ago. A Chinese locomotive left Yiwu, an East Coast Chinese port, bound for London, England. It is an 18-day, 7,500-mile trip. Pretty long trip. Some of that freight on the train was delivered to Duisburg, Germany, which I believe is right outside of Berlin, and the remainder was bound for London. Over 1,700 freight trains made this trip from China to Europe in 2016. That is more than double the 2015 figure. The European executives responded quickly that Chinese rail service is quicker than sea and definitely cheaper than air. But what is the connection? How did the trains travel from Germany to London? Well, there is only one fixed link, and that is called the English Channel Tunnel. Give you a little synopsis of it. It's the only fixed link between Great Britain and the European Midland. This project was launched in 1986, and it took 2 countries to build it, France and England. It has been a very successful project, and they use it every day to move freight and passengers. I have a video link, and I'm going to let your professor let you see that on your own time. Now, there have been some scientists saying there's even a quicker way to get there. This train uses no steel wheels or rails. It is known as a maglev. A maglev train is powered by magnets alternating between north and south. A couple of countries that tested this futuristic train were Japan and Germany. Both of these projects happened to fall through. Above is Japan's version, the MLX-01, which smashed a world speed record of over 500 miles an hour in the late 90s. And this is seen on the 27-mile test track west of Tokyo until its retirement in 2011. And see above we have Germany's version. This was launched by Deutsche Bahn, or DB Rail.